Love is no doubt a good thing, but who can say what it is? Who can define it? Is it the feeling or the action or the words or just an idea? The story of Echefu, a woman of great intelligence and accomplishment, who within a short period of 5 years would traverse the full spectrum of emotions, from the passions of attraction to the revulsion of resentment, from the dizzying height of ecstasy to the darkest depth of depression. A person that vomited what he did not eat certainly ate what he did not know. If it was love, how could it turn sour so soon? If it was pretense, how could it feel so strong and so overwhelming? So much gray areas around this opium of the heart called love. This thing called love, had it been you are a person to answer for your actions, an ocean won't contain the flood of questions that are demanding for your answers. Echefu was a beautiful working-class lady. Although she was in her late 30s, she was still stunning in appearance. In fact, her beauty was such that her pastor's wife would rather risk losing the weighty tithes and offerings that comes from her than allow her husband visit Echefu's house. Her job in the oil sector came with a very juicy package. Her generosity generated a throng of friends for her. Friends that see her more as an easy access to cash than an easy companion to be with. She was both valued and envied for her jumbo-sized salary. Her mother appreciated her steady stream of generosity, but worried about the absence of a marriage ring on her finger. The only thing remaining to complete the perfect picture of her life was her husband. Having crossed her mid-30th birthday, the pressure of societal expectation was building up by the day. It was as though she was at the last lap of a marriage relay race, and 40 was the cross line beyond which all hope of marriage seemed to disappear. She tried to stay mentally strong. She tried to do more fasting and prayer, to give more tithes and offering, win more souls for God. She was, after all, the product of her society, a psychophysical cocktail of a largely superstitious culture, which made her vulnerable to the triggers of tradition, reliant on the rigged roads of religious rituals and doctrines. So even with money, beauty, and brain, she still couldn't escape the social hypnosis of associations. She believed that it was her devotion in the church that gave her such a lucrative job, not her near-genius skill in computer, not her shining academic records. No, it must be God, God alone. Merit has no merit in the circle of religious faith and belief. You must please God or you are doomed. That was the doctrine that drove her actions, the philosophy that filtered her thoughts. As she fret and prayed for a husband, a man that would change her marital status and rescue her from the constant barrage of scornful comments and smearing sermon about the dark stains of protracted spinsterhood, she felt compelled to redouble her effort in pleasing the God, or rather, the pastor whom God had used to prophesy the good job into her life. As a Christian by background and inclination, church was her only venue for ventilation, her only resource for reassurance. When, after 2 years of unemployment, she got a job the very week Pastor Oka prophesied while preaching one Sunday that someone here is about to get a good job, Echefu believed that that prophecy was her wind of deliverance, and Pastor Oka was the extension of God's hand for her deliverance. Since that day till date, Echefu had made the church her pillar and the pastor her infallible guide. To source for a husband material, Echefu had only one area for exploration, the church, and one person to seek direction from, Pastor Oka. Yes, she was open to the approaches of men, not just any man, but God-fearing men, church-going men, tongue-speaking men, faith-speaking men, men with the history of 40 days fasting. Echefu's idea of marriage is a union of two prayer warriors who have nothing else to do with their spare time than to bombard the kingdom of darkness and rescue lost souls for Christ. Many men that approached her for a chance in a relationship fell short of her spiritual standard. Yes, she was in need of a marriage partner, but she was in an even more need of a spiritual partner. She was a woman who was full of the passion for the church. Her devotion was intense. Her faith was fierce. She pursued piety even beyond the limit of St. Peter. Her pastor, while verbally applauding her extreme zeal, diligence and devotion in the things of the church, hid his uneasiness at the signs of fanaticism masquerading as devotion. Pastor Oka was a brilliant man with grace and charisma, but life was not this easy with him from the onset. A product of an absent father and a poor and emotionally broken mother, Pastor Oka and his younger brother Jonah knew of a level of hardship that is unimaginable to many. When he discovered that people in impoverished countries resonate well with loud and passionate utterances of faith and promises of God, he joined the ministry of peddling these promises. Soon, his intelligence and charisma drew a sizable following for him, and so he did the next logical thing: opened his own church, called himself a bishop, and launched with passion the full business of broadcasting the promises of God into the ears of wealth-hungry people, peace-hungry people, security-hungry people. My people, a bath is not a danger to a satisfied person. If not hunger, what has rat got to do with rat poison? Now, Pastor Oka has made a degree of success. About 100 people call him their daddy, a fond name for spiritual father, but he wanted more. And Echefu seemed the right ladder to his next level of success, or as he would put it, his higher level of glory. So as Echefu continued bombarding him with requests for a prayer for marriage partner, it didn't take long before he remembered his younger brother, Jonah. The problem is that Jonah was already living with a woman who had a daughter for him. Jonah's case was not uncommon in the society. A society that has very little employment opportunity, but ironically demands very costly bride price and marriage rights from young people, are literally asking the young ones to join themselves by themselves in a cohabiting union without the stamp of tradition and custom. But Pastor Oka was not a man that little things like the cohabitation of two adults in an emotional, sexual, and physical union would deter from his plan. Jonah must be rescued from poverty. So, he visited his brother Jonah, gave his baby mama enough incentive to disappear with her baby. A week later, Jonah appeared in the church as Pastor Oka's younger brother, who had been in the missionary field all these years. 5 days later, Pastor Oka had a vision and God spoke. Thus said the Lord your God, Jonah is the man for Sister Echefu. Sister Echefu struggled to contain her excitement. Jonah was the perfection she had been looking for. He met her specifications. He attended church regularly. He prayed with intensity and spoke in tongues sometimes. There was passion and force in his voice when he speaks and acts. God again had come to her rescue through Pastor Oka. Although this choice of God seemed to have small authority problem, he had an attitude of domination and authority that brooks no form of objection or interrogation. He seemed to expect obedience and obeisance from her. For a high-profile, high-achieving girl like Echefu, this was a red flag. A domineering man raised too many red flags and friction within her. But maybe God wanted to use him to teach her humility. Or maybe God was waiting for them to be officially married before changing him into the godly husband she prayed for. Her tolerance and condonement of Jonah's excesses seemed to embolden Jonah and reinforce his authoritarian tendencies the more. So much so that even Echefu could not endure it anymore. So she began considering a termination of the relationship. But being mentally chained to the church and the primacy of the opinion of the pastor, she again sought counsel and guidance from the mouth of the man of God. Pastor Oka showed evident empathy to her complaints, showed evident anger at what she had claimed to have suffered, even showed evident agreement in her desire to dissolve her courtship with Jonah. Then, just as they were concluding on the rightness of dissolving the courtship, Pastor Oka asked that they pray and seek the will of God in this matter a final time. 2 minutes into the prayer, Pastor Jonah started shaking and prophesying with tears in his eyes. The end of the story was that God's choice for Echefu was Jonah. Who can understand the Almighty God? Just as heaven is high above the earth, so are God's ways higher than that of man. Pastor Oka said. So Echefu left that meeting not sad that her intention did not pass through God's approval, rather happy that God had given her an assignment, which was to pray for the transformation of Jonah's heart. But Pastor Oka was not a newbie in the games of the heart, so very quickly he read the signs. Knowing that the likes of Echefu as a wife were rare to find, not just for her beauty and brain, but most especially for the material assets she would be bringing with her, he kept his feelings in check as he bid her bye. Red with rage at the great loss Jonah's stupidity might cost him, he stormed into Jonah's tiny room and gave him a piece of his mind. A dosage of Pastor Oka's rage seemed to have reset Jonah's brain, and suddenly the proud authoritarian man we know as Jonah overnight became a dove of gentility, a champion of humility. Years of poverty and struggle for survival had sharpened Jonah's shrewdness. The sudden jettisoning of his baby mama, whom he had strong feelings for, was reason for his acting out. But now he knew better. He knew what was at stake. The prodigal son realized his mistake. And so, quickly, he tucked in his untoward pride and stupid acts and humbly embarked on an intensive heart-winning campaign. The affection, or rather affectation he showered on Echefu was enough to evoke the feelings of affection and care in her heart. She was awash with emotions that are commonly defined as being in love. Jonah's turnaround affection meant even more to her because she considered it a spiritual victory as a result of the answers to her prayers. Is there anything God cannot do? Is there any problem prayers cannot solve? Had there ever been any matter, any issue prayer cannot resolve? These were her testimonies, her sing-songs. Jonah's story was not unlike many other people's stories in the country. With a master's degree in engineering, the pressure of massive unemployment in the land had pressed him down to the position of a primary school classroom teacher in a rather run-down private school. Compelled by the condition of life to put on a smiley face in the presence of an overbearing boss, he held on to life by hanging on to hope. Hope that one day things would be better. He resented himself, resented the life he was living, a life of silent frustration, a life of smiling frustration. Then he met Alice, his baby mama. Alice was a hustler with little education. Jonah was a man full of his own importance, full of his own education, but with little hustling spirit. Perhaps that was why, with his master's degree certificate, he couldn't hustle out a better job other than a primary classroom teacher in a dingy place. But Alice was a hustler that worshipped education. Maybe because she had so little of it. She believed she would have achieved much if she was well educated. When she met Jonah, she adored him because rumors said Jonah is the master of education. She admired the way he talked, the big words that came from his mouth, the way he kept his head while explaining things that confused other teachers. This shower of adoration inflamed Jonah's loins towards Alice. Soon they were sleeping together. Alice felt undeserving of the attention of not only an educated Prince Charming, but a Prince Charming that is the master of education. Alice pushed and pulled herself to satisfy Jonah. When she became pregnant, she was sure that her child would be a genius just like Jonah. As Alice fed Jonah with affection and provisions, his ego and pride grew fat on the surplus of love on his table. Now the monster one woman had created had come to hunt another woman. But Jonah knew better than to rock the boat before it reached the shore of marriage vows and legal documentation. Echefu as a wife would not just be a sure ticket to financial stability, but would also be his ladder up the social strata of respect and prestige. So with his eyes on the prize, Jonah made time, effort, and sacrifice to win Echefu's heart. Echefu was doused and drenched by the plows and promises of passionate words of affection and romantic poems and messages. A girl groomed in the dry and rigid groove of doctrines and rituals was suddenly being exposed to other realms of reality, like an affectionate short note in her front door in the morning, 3 thoughtful text messages in a day, a bouquet of flowers, an insightful compliment of her dress or shoe. Little by little, she stopped seeing him as a burden from God, but as a blessing from heaven. Her heart opened to him, her bank account opened for him, and her body opened for him. They did it even before they made the vows, and she believed him when he said it was no sin because God, who approved of our union, had already ordained us as husband and wife. Jonah, who had so little to offer in terms of material provisions, overcompensated with a zealous show of protectiveness and affection. In hindsight, one can easily see how that show of protectiveness could as well have been a classical sign of insecure jealousy, masquerading as protectiveness. But as at that time, it was seen as protectiveness, a sign of strong love. It endeared him the more to the young lady, and soon marriage was no longer a speculative concept, but a concrete project, pursued with force and faith. The wedding day was splendid. The honeymoon was wonderful. As the years of the marriage grew, 3 children were added, and the financial responsibilities grew correspondingly. Mrs. Jonah, as Echefu so proudly demanded that she should be addressed, was still the chief breadwinner of the family. But now, the burden of shouldering the responsibility of the family was beginning to strain the strings of her emotional and financial strength. She wished her man would take care of her, provide for her, and allow her to sleep without the debacle of urgent family needs hanging over her. She yearned for just a moment of peaceful sleep, untampered by the burdens of family responsibility. But the state of the nation's economy was such that a single misstep in her job would land her in the merry slum of the labor market. Without a job, without an earning capacity, a citizen is no more than a ghost without any shadow of regard or respect. That Echefu knew very well. That Echefu strove to avoid. Jonah, her husband, has tried so many businesses, but nothing has sprouted nor borne any fruit. It was now their 5th year of marriage, with 3 children. Echefu was no longer as young, strong, vibrant, and beautiful as she used to be. Giving birth to 3 children and working a 7-to-5 job in a highly demanding company had frayed and waned her strength. She desperately needed a rest, a solace. But her situation did not offer her such luxury. In the year 2020, during the COVID-19 global lockdown, many companies cut down their staff strength. There was massive retrenchment and retirement of staffs. Unfortunately, Echefu was one of the people that lost their jobs. Being a resourceful person, she was quick to venture into online marketing. Soon she was making enough money to keep the family afloat again. Meanwhile, her husband was busy monkeying from one form of investment to another with no tangible result. Then one fateful day, Echefu's friend, Ada, called to inform her of a new job opening in a mid-year house. Ada wanted Echefu to apply for the job, but she was tired of being tied to the demands of monthly paycheck again. She enjoyed being with family and working from home in her online business. So she decided that she would pass the offer to her husband. But Ada was adamantly against recommending Jonah. She was afraid Jonah would change for the worse and betray Echefu. But Echefu, a woman with a soft heart, reassured her that nothing of such will happen. Echefu believed that her husband owed her too much to even imagine cheating on her. So reluctantly, Ada agreed and recommended Jonah for the job. Jonah was sure he did not pass the job interview, but the director of the company, who had very high regard for Ada and Echefu, could not refuse when Echefu called to beg that her husband be employed. And so did Jonah get his first real job after many years of trying. Having not had a really well-paying job before, Jonah was shocked at how much he was making at the end of every month. It was almost 25 times what he was making when he was a private school teacher. In the first 3 months after starting the job, Jonah was the perfect family man. He rushed home as soon as his office hours were over. He made efforts to support his wife in providing for the family. But Echefu was not quite pleased by her husband's insistence that they share the financial burden of the family 50-50. Echefu knew that Jonah's salary was 10 times more than what she made per month. Whenever she tried reasoning with him about it, Jonah always came up with reasons why his salary should be shared and part of it saved. At first, Echefu was happy that her husband was planning for their future. But as time went by, she began to feel a subtle change in the attitude of Jonah. Being a woman who was not given to suspicion or thinking the worst about anybody, she chalked up her husband's change of attitude as a sign of stress and pressure from his job. So she redoubled her effort to lessen the pressure on him. She even began to refrain from making financial demands on him. With the little she made from her online businesses, she kept taking care of the family needs. But instead of her thoughtful efforts drawing her husband closer, he seemed to be more and more repelled by her. Soon, quarrels and conflicts became a frequent occurrence in their home. Jonah began to forget his wedding ring more often than not. He began to keep late nights regularly. With time, their relationship worsened to the point that he often sleeps outside their home every now and then. Echefu was confused and deeply hurt at this negative turn of events in her marriage. But the blow that nearly killed her was when Jonah came home one day and started packing his things. When she confronted him, he simply said that he was no longer interested in the marriage. I have found a new path for myself. You find your own path. Do yourself a favor. Don't cross my path. That was the exact last words he said to her before leaving their home. A week later, she discovered that Jonah had rented a new apartment in another side of the city and was now living with another woman who he proudly showed off as his wife. When Echefu sent someone to spy on Jonah, she was shocked to learn that her husband's new wife was actually pregnant and Jonah was going extra miles to please her. Echefu's friend Ada was so angry at Jonah that she made moves to seek for a termination of Jonah's job. But by then, Jonah had already grown to the position of a partner in the company. While Echefu was lamenting and wondering in confusion what she must have done wrong, it was Ada, her friend, that gave a sensible explanation as to what happened. According to Ada, Jonah was a man of too much pride and too little love. His opinion of himself was as huge as Mount Everest. Having gone up to the extent of getting a master's degree bloated the more his ego. But when he could not get a good job, even with his good certificate, he reluctantly settled for the lowly private school teacher. This turn of events festered this sitting anger and resentment in him. He bottled within his frame a boiling bitterness against the president, the system, and anyone who seemed favored by the apparently unjust scale of providence. When Echefu entered his life, he did not see a girl to be loved and cherished. What he saw was someone who was undeserving of the life she had. He was fascinated by the fact that Echefu could get easily the financial status that many years of his tears and toils could not get him. Seeing no better option than Echefu in sight, he launched all his antics to attract and endear himself to her. He made marrying Echefu his new mission. He bottled his bleeding bitterness and shelved his puffed and punctured pride before playing to Echefu's whims and wishes. Echefu considered her husband's docility, her husband's quietness as love. What she didn't realize was that beneath his quietness was a raging fire of unrest that sought release. He did not find peace and release in the marriage. The marriage to him was like the private school teaching job he once had. Something to suffer so as to make ends meet. His getting a well-paying job gave him a window of escape. Initially, he wanted to do the right things by his wife, but she always represented to him the one that reduced him to a beggar, a dependent, a lowly sit-at-home husband, even with his master's degree. Their history together was a humiliation he yearned to forget. When another girl, Miriam, caught his attention, he felt for once the joy of hunting and conquering. This was not the case with Alice, his first baby mama, whom he had to accept because she was a hustler and a worshipper of him. This one was different. This one was about him, equipped and empowered to go out in the world like a man and hunt down the woman of his desire like real men do. He felt his battered pride revived. He enjoyed the fact that it was a new set of situation where his past of penury would not come up now and then to mock him. And so did it happen that a once wonderful husband suddenly cut off the family he had built up for years in pursuit of the promises of a new family where he would be the sole hunter and provider. To Jonah, a man without the means is no man. Years of poverty and dependency had so colored his perception that he saw only through one prism, the prism of the power of money. Echefu herself had been dangling between the extreme poles of self-blame on one side and intense hatred on the other side. When she sought the help and intervention of Pastor Oka, she was shocked to know that Pastor Oka had neither time nor thought for her. Ever since her tithes and contribution to the church had decreased because of her loss of job, Pastor Oka and his wife changed drastically towards her. In fact, they specifically told her to stop disturbing the pastor with her problems. Ada, her friend, was the one that uncovered the story of Jonah's first baby mama. She even brought Alice to Echefu, and she got to learn how her pastor bribed the lady into living with her daughter. Echefu was stunned beyond words. Now her whole life seemed like an embarrassing dance before pretenders. She felt every praise, every commendation, every applaud she ever got was a sound of mockery. To make matters worse, she had been battling with the treatment of stage 2 breast cancer. She had not told anyone yet. There was no one around her that seemed sympathetic enough to share her secret with. She looked at her 3 children playing outside. Their landlord's quit notice was delivered to her yesterday because of backloads of unpaid rent. Most of her income was being used to offset the bills for her cancer treatment. Now the worst that could happen seemed inevitable. She remembered the day she made the down payment for the church land. She remembered transferring money for cement, zinc, labor, and other building materials for the church. She remembered sponsoring the pastor to trips abroad. She remembered Jonah, her husband, her generosity towards him, her fidelity and loyalty to him. This was a long nightmare, and she was determined to wake up from it. A woman scorned, a woman betrayed no more things. She is a hurricane, blind to reason and caution. That was what Echefu was. Where she got a gun, no one to this day knows. But 3 days after all secrets were stripped of their cloak of secrecy, Echefu, disguised as a hotel staff, surprised Pastor Oka in a hotel room expecting his secret lover. When she left the room, the pastor was no more breathing. Later that day, she met Jonah in front of a popular car dealer's office. She had hacked their website to offer Jonah a good price for the car she bought in his name. Jonah was waiting for the car agent who would transfer the money when Echefu entered the back seat. When she left the car, Jonah was no longer breathing. The last thing that was heard of Echefu was a small note she left for her mom. She wrote, "Hello, Mom. The kids are all that is left of me. They have no big salary, no beautiful bodies, intelligent brain, and obedient spirits. They have nothing to make you love them. If you can love them anyways, then they are yours. If you can't, please sell my lands in Port Harcourt and send them to daycares and boarding schools as they grow older. Thanks and bye, daughter Echefu." This is the end of Echefu's tragic life. Now I ask, do you think Echefu is to be blamed? Is there something she should have done differently? Do you think she did the right thing by taking justice in her own hands? Did Pastor Oka and Jonah deserve what Echefu did to them? What about her children? Do you think her method of escape was what was best for the innocent children she left behind? Do you think that was too selfish of her, or that she had no choice? Please let me have your opinions in the comment section. If you like our nuanced and psychologically analyzed stories, please feel free to subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more. Thank you for watching and do have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.